right?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so with respect to join, I'm not sure uh, where we were. So we had created, if I'm not wrong, let's quickly check. I think some
We
of these
talked
data.
about we talked about various concepts of joins, inner join, outer join, left outer join,
Right.
and all the various joins we talked about. Yeah, and we also created
Mhm.
one data set including that. So
Yes,
wherein you showed me the various concepts of how a joining works with the data set
right.
as such. That I remember.
Yes, makes sense. Okay, so I have added a few extra data sets, but let me go ahead and delete them. So what I'll do is I'll quickly check the data set, and then I'll delete some of the extra ones I've created and we'll redo them.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at the lineage. So the last time when we, or should I, uh, create a new one? Now this is what the problem becomes. You're really not sure where you are. Let me create those three data sets once again. I think those
Oh,
are all
once again.
deleted.
Yeah.
This is how it happens, right? People go into the system, they keep changing it. This is shared by a lot of people. But then this one takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I would quickly go ahead and create them within a minute maximum.
Mm,
Okay, so this
okay.
is WB underscore. Uh, Let me quickly give it a name. This is November 11th base data set 01. We are creating it from custom report, and this is company details or company structure. I'll run upload it in replace mode real quick. So our first data set is done. Uh, um, I'll remove the tag. Got it. So this is our first data set. I'll There's just one more change we have to do while we create a new data set. So okay, ZF supervisory structure. Here we just need to specify the date, which is today. Mm, okay. Oh, global modern services. Okay, done. Run now. Uh, um, this is WB November 17th BDS 02 created through a custom report and supervisory details. Replace mode. Okay. Okay. Here I just need to create a new tag which is WB underscore November 17th. So this is our new tag. Okay, this is done. This is our second one. While this opens, let me quickly create the third one. ZF, this is worker details. Okay, run now. Mm, So this is BDS 03 and worker details in replace mode. Okay, and done. Okay, the tenant looks very slow. So we have created all data sets. This is what we had done earlier. And then we
Yeah.
were in the process, we had created our first derived data set as well. But before that,
Right.
I should be adding my tag. Else, there are so many data sets with the same name, we'll get confused. And this is the third one, view in new tab. Okay, and then we were creating our derived data set. So this is where we were. So while creating my derived data set, I'll use company details, right? So the moment I create my derived data set, we already know that Workday automatically creates a primary pipeline. Uh,
Yeah.
so this is my derived data set 01, and this is at level 1. So I'm just calling it 01. We already have our tags and save. So that's all I need to do for creating a derived data set. Has it got any data? Okay, the third thing, I should be logging in as, because this user doesn't have any authorization. So I would have to proxy as Logan McNeil. This data set would be empty, and the reason is the base data set doesn't have any data. If I go in details, there's no data. Okay, I should have proxied with Logan McNeil earlier. All right, data catalog. So when the data wouldn't get loaded into your data set when there's no data in the source or you don't have any authorization at all. So for example, in this case, if I go back and look at the worker details data set, you'll see that there's no data. Now, if I do that real quick, you'll see that currently, or uh, this one, you'll see that currently there's no data, and the reason for that is the user that we had run this integration with doesn't have any access. So Workday automatically creates an integration when you create a data set for a custom report or for an SFTP, right? So
Mhm.
okay, so here right now, again, if I can quickly check, there's no data. That's because the user didn't have any integration. I can always go ahead and either rerun that integration or I can edit the integration schedule. If you remember, when we initially create a base data set, it asks me for that schedule, run now or run in future. We can always go ahead and change the integration schedule later on. Something we'll talk about later. For now, I want to quickly run this integration once again. So I'm saying run now. I'll rerun this integration, say OK, and done. Let's refresh. And now if you see, the data is loaded, which means let's see what is happening with our derived data set now. All right, here as well, the data is loaded. Okay, let's edit this data set. So now I have brought my company details into the derived data set as we saw the other day. I can create any number of new pipelines by adding incremental data sets. So I want to add a new stage, which is basically the join stage, which we did last time. I'm saying join. The second pipeline I'm selecting is the supervisory structure. And the reason I'm selecting that is because that's where uh, VDS02 supervisory details. Yes. So I'm selecting this. I would specify what is the key based on which I want to do this join. And the key we discussed last time was sector with sector here. And I want to include all fields from my primary pipeline. So I'm saying select all, and I'm saying left out outer join, something we discussed last time. So all rows from the left table or the primary pipeline will be included, plus only matching rows from the secondary pipeline. So this is my secondary pipeline. I want to include all the rows except for sector, which is something which is already included from the first table, and sector BU. Right, so now when I look at this table, this is how my data set looks. Okay, what I also want is, if I go to primary pipeline, if you see, there are these two extra fields that Workday has added, the WPA load fields. I don't even want these two fields. And also from the secondary pipeline, I don't want those fields. So I'm selecting secondary pipeline as well, and I'm removing those two fields. So I'm basically removing 4 fields, those WPA load fields from the pipeline. Okay, so this is our first derived data set. What I'll do is I'll create a new derived data set. And the reason for that is, as we discussed last time, in between our first report, which is company details and organization details, we have done a matching between this subtype and this sector. But then there are a lot of other fields which whose exact subtype is not a match to sector, but then they still belongs to a business unit, right? The example that we saw here. So I have to create a new data set, a new derived data set with exactly the same details. The only difference is there I would do a join not with sector field here, but with the second field, which is sector underscore B, right? Because there as well we have a number of matches. So let me create a new derived data set and we'll see the difference between those two data sets. So again, I'm creating a new derived data set. My primary pipeline is obviously BDS01 company details, exactly same as we here see here. So if I cancel, so my primary pipeline still be the same. I'm selecting BDS01. This is my derived data set number 02, right? The tags are November 17th and save. So this has created a new data set which is exactly similar to this, the import stage that I have here, right? It would also have the exact same data. All right, if I go to edit now, you'll see that it has the exact same data as the other data set I have, right? I would again do a join again with the same supervisory org data set. So again, I'm joining a date, join with BDS02 supervisory organization. Again, from my primary pipeline, I'll still select sector, but from my secondary pipeline, I am selecting sector underscore. I'll select all fields from primary pipeline, except for obviously these two fields. And from my secondary pipeline, again, I'll select all the fields except for obviously sector and sector DU and these two WPA fields. Again, save. Now, if you see the difference between these two data sets, now if you see the difference between these two data sets, I have done the exact same thing, but the number of rows that are returned is different. The reason for that is in my first one, I basically joined this sector here with, let me open the supervisory details. I joined this sector here, right? with the sector field in the supervisory org. As a result, only a few companies were returned, which were basically my business units. But the second time I did a join with the second sector underscore BU. So now if you see, the number of records that are returned are many more. So now I have all data, which is basically all of my business units, but also all of those subordinates which belong to those business units. And that is why I have created two different subtypes. If you see, I created subtype and subtype sector. So this is the immediate subtype of that supervisory org, and this is the subtype of the business unit that supervisory org belongs to, right? And that is why I created these two different fields, because if I don't do that, system would not return as full data. So now I have full data, but in two different data sets. One is my DDS02 and the second one is my DDS01. And both of these have the same set of columns. So what does a join do? We discussed last time. So if I can add it here, today is 22nd. So we have discussed what is a join stage. A join basically changes the number of rows, right? So a join decides how many rows are. So if I have to define a join stage combines columns from two data sets or two pipelines based on common values that exist in each pipeline, right? So now, based on join, I have created two data sets. One is DDS01 and DDS02. So DDS01 has some 5 or 10 records. Again, so these are 8 records in DDS01. In DDS02, I have some 100, 200 or whatever the count of records. But the number of columns is exactly the same. Now what I need is all of this data should come together. So the first derived data set has 8 records or 8 rows, and second data set has, let's say, 100 rows. So the number of rows are different, but both of them have exactly the same columns. Now what I ultimately want is a single data set, let's say DDS03, which has all of these 108 rows. So I want to create a single data set now, which has all the rows in all the data sets. Now for that, I would create a union stage. So what is a union stage? A join stage joins two tables or data from two different tables and includes fields from both of those tables. However, a union stage, it gets data from two different tables, but then it doesn't include all the columns. What it does is it joins data from table 1 with table 2. So it basically appends the data, provided both of those data sets have the same number of columns. So if my first data set has 10 columns, column A is worker data, column B is some worker type, and so on and so forth. The second data set should also have the same columns. If there is a match in the column and then you do a union, system gives you a sum of all data in both of those data sets. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I have two data sets in two, and I have data in two different tables. I want to join this data. So I would create a new data set, a new derived data set. So now, so now I'm creating a new derived data set based on these two derived data sets that I have already created. As I mentioned earlier, so a derived data set can be based on existing base data sets. It could be created using existing tables, or it could be created using existing derived data sets. So this is my first derived data set that I'll use to create my new derived data set. I'm selecting that and I'll call it, give it the same name. So this is my derived data set number 3, but it is at level 2, right? So these two derived data sets are at same level. That's why I have given them 0 1 and 0 1 to identify that they are at the same level. And this is at the next level. So I'm calling it at level 2, would tag it to November 17th and save this. So now this data set, if you see, has the exact same data as the company details one, because that is the pipeline. If you see, it takes company details and that is the data it has. But I also want to combine data from the second derived data set. So now what I'll do is I'll do a union stage. So the difference between a join and a union, join joins the columns in two tables. A union sums the rows in two tables. So when I click on add stage, I'll do a union, select obviously another pipeline, and the second pipeline I'm selecting is my DDS 02. Select. The moment I do that, if you see, it shows me derived data set 01. Yes. So the moment I do that, if you see, it shows me all the matching columns. Why is that it only shows me these matching columns? There should be extra more. Cancel. Parent company ID, supervisory org workday ID. Mm, 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 DDS 0201 company details.
No, there is 02, I guess. You have given it as 02, right?
Yeah, I the first one is 01 and so the primary,
There's
let's
one
see what.
more, 02 you selected.
Let me quickly check. So this is DDS 01 company details, and I
Yeah.
want to union this with DDS 0201 company details, right?
Mm.
Oh, I have not saved this, sorry. That's why. Okay, now I have saved it. That's why it is important. Okay, now it will show me everything. So now I'm unioning it. So I'm basically, you can, this is what I'm doing once again. I have some data in
Yeah,
DDS
yeah,
0101,
yeah.
some data in DDS 0201. I'm unioning
Mm.
both of them.
Yeah.
And now it shows me everything, right? Because I have
Mm.
not saved it. So now it says me, okay. So this is why it is, oh, Sky, can you be on mute? So sorry, yeah. I get a lot of this. Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, so if you see, this is what union does, right? It basically takes all, provided the columns are matching, and if you see, this is how it is matching the columns. So it takes, okay, this is the first column or this column of the primary pipeline. Is there a match in the secondary pipeline? And this is how it matches everything. So this is the columns that it refers in both of these pipelines to see if there is a match, and that's how it shows me this match. Okay, this is the new name of the column, which is the name of the union output, And this column has been created by a combination of column X from primary pipeline with column X from secondary pipeline. So now when I say done, you'll see it shows me the combined data, the data combined from both of those data sets. So a union stage changes the number of rows of data. Okay, so a union stage combines data from similar fields in different data sets into a single field, right? Obviously, this can only be done on a derived data set. So union stage can only be applied on a derived data set, and the reason for that is pretty clear, because derived data sets are the only data sets that can use multiple data sources, right? Base data sets cannot use more than one data source. Okay, now the next thing, so that is a union stage. All right, let me go ahead and save this. Let's look at the hierarchy, the lineage now, and quickly see what have we done till now. So I go to the data set and quickly view the lineage. So this is what I have done. We have two base data sets, which is company details and supervisory org details. First, we took these two data sets and joined them using DDS01 company details. The same data sets we joined using DDS02, again based on the sector, and then we basically unioned these two derived data sets. So this is where we are right now. All right. Any questions?
Yeah, one question.
Mhm.
So I understand we did the union and all. So basically, so we did this for we took that and then we
So
took
this is
two
what we have
different
done.
data sets.
Let's show that, right? So okay. So first
So
we had custom
basically, what
report,
will yeah, go ahead.
CR company, and then we had custom report supervisory, right? So using this custom report, we created our BDS01, and then using this, we created BDS02. Then we took both of them and created a derived data set, DDS01, which is basically a join of these two, right? And the join was done, and the join was basically done if sector in BDS01 maps to sector in DDS02, right? Okay, now again, we took the exact same thing here. Again, we did similar join to create DDS02, which is also the result of a join. So we did that. But here the difference was we basically checked if sector is equal to sector underscore BU, the second sector related field that we created. So now we have two different data sets, DDS01 and 02. Combining them, we created DDS03, which is basically a union stage. So this is what shows here. We first took both these, joined into DDS01. If you see, the mapping comes from here to here and from here to here, but then they were also mapped to DDS02, and then DDS01 and 02 unioned to create DDS03. Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Was that your question?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Right, and the reason I had to do that was because there was no way to find for me to find a direct match, right? Some companies had their current subtype as business unit, but for some other companies they belong to a business unit called mobile or IT or life sciences and so on and so forth. So that's why we had to create two different derived data sets for those two different mappings. In one single,
Okay.
there was no way for me to map that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you see, I have my worker details as well. Now, again, my worker details, how are they mapping? So here we now have a single derived data set, which if you see have company workday ID, it has sector, and it has a few other details. Plus all of this data is now in there. So now in this final data set that we have reached till now, all of this data is combined, right? Makes sense? So this is where we are. Let's close this. And if I go to DDS03, so if you see, it has all fields from company custom report, which is company name, company workday ID, the sector, parent company, and everything from first. And then it also has all the fields from the second custom report, which is supervisory org name, supervisory org workday ID, the org level from top. We don't need this because this is something we already have from sector. And then we have headcount fy minus 1 and fy minus 2. So combining these two custom reports, we have now created a single report which has, or a single data set which has all the data from these two reports. Make sense? Clear till now?
Yes, yes, Ravi.
Okay.
Sorry,
So
I had
now,
a lot of background
no
noise,
problem there.
so I'll be on hold.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So now we still have our third custom report, which basically has the worker details. So I still need to combine that base data set in here, because ultimately for each of these companies, I also want to understand the workers who are part of that companies. So here we have this single derived data set. Now I'm going to join that with this base data set. And how am I going to join? We still have this common matching criteria. Supervisory org maps to supervisory org here, and supervisory org workday ID maps to supervisory org workday ID here, right? So this is my final derived data set which we have created till now, DDS03. Now I'll edit this. I'll create one more join, right? So after this union, I'm going to create one more join, and this time I'm going to join it with the base data set, the worker details. So here, if you see, we have BDS03. Where is our BDS? We have BDS03 worker details. So I'm going to select that. Again, because it is a join, I'll have to specify a criteria, and that is the supervisory org. So here we have supervisory org name matches the supervisory org name here, but also I want to be doubly sure. So I'll also verify that the supervisory org workday ID also maps to the supervisory org workday ID here. Again, I'll select every field from my first data set, which is my primary pipeline. But from my secondary pipeline, I would not select the supervisory org details. And the reason is we already have that from the first data set. I'll also remove the WPA load ID and the load timestamp. And when I say done now and save this, now if you see our final output, it has all the fields: supervisory org workday ID, FY headcount, FY headcount -2, but then it also has the worker name, the employee data. So everything is added from my base data set as well, right? So if I go ahead and refresh this lineage, let's see data set. Let me view lineage once again. So now with this, I have created a new join. This is for the third base data set that we had created. So these were our first two base data sets, and now this is our third base data set. I'll move
Yeah.
this to the first one. Okay, now in addition to this, I can also do some kind of filtering, right? So for example, let's say if I go back and let's see our data. All right. So if you see for a let's see what is happening. Let's look at a lot of fields are null.
One question I had,
Hmm.
Ravi.
Yeah,
Can we not have multiple join stages?
we can we can do any number of joins.
Okay, because I remember because I'm seeing only one join, so I was wondering. Okay,
No, in a
maybe.
single join, if I want now,
Yeah.
I can do one more join,
Okay, okay, okay.
right?
Yeah,
But
that's
in a
possible,
single
right?
join,
Okay.
I can only join two tables. That's it.
Two tablets. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So let's say I want to remove certain rows, right? I want to put an additional filter criteria. Now for that, I can do add an additional stage, which is basically the filter stage. So if you see here, let's look at this one. This, if you see row number 28, it has no supervisory org. So supervisory org is null, and then followed by everything following that is basically null. So maybe I want to put, and if you look at worker details, everything post that is actually null. So maybe I want to add a filter saying that anywhere where supervisory org name is null, I don't need those records because those records basically do not have any data. So now I am going to add a filter stage, right? So filter acts like a normal filter criteria. Okay, so let me add a filter stage. Okay, I can add a new filter, and I'm saying wherever supervisory org name is null. And let's see what happens now. So where is our row number 28? So this is our row number 28, which is Middle East and Africa, followed by EMEA, which has all null values. So when I say now, right? Okay, I should have selected is not null. So because I've selected supervisory org is null, it is only giving me 3 rows of data where supervisory org is null. So let me change this and I will say is not null. So if I add multiple filters, Workday treats them as an end condition and condition. So now if you look at 28, row number 28, that Middle East and EMEA is no longer visible. If I want, I can add an additional filter, and all filter conditions, they act as an and condition. All right, and save my report. So now if you see, I have created or added multiple stages to my data set. All right. Next, what I also want to do is I want to add a few different calculations. So for example, let's say I want to currently, if you see the head count as an example, okay, if you see right now for head count, now head count can be, let's say I have a head count of 100, right? Or at the maximum, I can have a head count of 100.5 or 100.85 because many people they do an FTE. But with respect to head count, you don't have this kind of precision, right? 92.00000, that is not required. So if I want, when we create any of our base data set, what Workday does is it automatically identifies the relevant field type for each of the columns, which becomes the schema for that data set. If we want, we can always go ahead and change that schema. Now this is done using the manage fields stage. So manage fields stage, a very important stage. Okay, so use the manage fields stage to view field changes, select fields, and edit fields. So what is the purpose of a manage field change? The second two make sense. If you see, it allows me to select certain fields, which is hide or display. It also allows me to edit fields, right? But then what is to view field changes? We'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, so what is this manage field stage? So when I say view field changes, the manage fields stage basically uses the output of the previous stage as a baseline from which to monitor changes. So when you add a manage field stage, let's say there is a base data set BDS01. Obviously, the first stage is parse stage in any base data set. And then let's say I add a manage field stage. Now what it does is it sees the output of the previous stage, the stage which is previous to the manage field stage, and sees is there any change in the output of the previous stage since the last time. If there is an error, if there is any change, then it gives a warning. So what it does is when this baseline changes, Workday warns you in the pipeline details panel. Okay, now we'll look at this with an example. But before talking about view field changes and before looking at this example, let me edit certain fields. So now I am in this derived data set. I want to make certain field changes. I would click on the manage fields. As I mentioned, manage fields changes allows you to basically do three things. If I want, I can select or deselect certain fields. So I don't want this field, I can uncheck this, right? Or I can, the second thing that I can do is I can edit the names of these fields. So currently this field is called company name. If I want, I can go ahead and make those modifications, right? The third thing that I can do is, so first thing, I can select or unselect certain fields. So certain fields, if they are hidden, I can I can select them and show them, make them visible. The second thing, I can change the names of individual fields. The third thing, which is most important, I can actually go ahead and change the field types. So as an example, FY headcount. If I click here, this is currently a field of type numeric. However, when I click here, you will see it has 6 digits after. When I scroll to the right, there are 6 digits after decimal. So when I select, I want only 2-digit precision. Here as well, I want 2-digit precision, and here as well I need 2 digits. In addition to this, if you see, for anything else, I can change the field type. From text, I can select numeric, long, boolean. Again, for example, if you see employee ID, let me scroll to the right. So we have worker name, which is what we see here, which is categorized as a text. But then if you see, the next field is actually employee ID, and employee IDs, if you see, is all numbers. However, Workday has currently categorized it as a text. So if I want, I can go ahead and change it to a numeric value, right? So I can make all of these field changes with a manage field stage, which is select fields. Oh, sorry. So we can select fields, we can edit fields, which is basically field names and field types. With respect to select fields, we can hide or display fields, right? Now, when I go ahead and save it, let's say done, and I move to the right, you can see now my head count has only two-digit precision. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But then the most important thing, something I mentioned. So manage field stage, it is also used to monitor your changes to the data source. Now, what do I mean by that? So let me open this base data set, which is BDS01. So I'm viewing this in a new tab. Now in this base data set, I want to add a manage field stage. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to monitor if there are any changes in the data source. So I am adding a manage fields stage. I'll not do any changes with that stage. I'll just add that stage. So here I'll add a manage field stage. As I mentioned, I'm not going to make any changes. All I'll do is save. This is all I'm doing. Now let me go back to the report, which is my company details. What I'm doing is I'm going back to the report, which is ZF company structure. Okay, now let me go ahead and edit this report. So this is very common. Many times you want to add extra fields to your data source. So now I realize that probably I'll have to add a new field. Let's see what fields are available and I'll add some random field. So maybe for supervisory org, I want to add the location of that supervisory org if a location is available. Okay, let's see. Let's see if there is location available. Okay, location primary. So I'm adding this field, right? So now what I'm doing is I'm changing the schema of my data source, right? Let's save this. And let me run this once. All right, this is fine. Okay, there's no data. All right. Okay, let me see if I can add some field. It doesn't matter what data is displayed, but still I want to add some field which has some data because we are not primarily concerned with the data. Let's see if I can. Okay, let me just say if it is active or not. Okay, as I mentioned, it doesn't matter. Okay, now it has some data. This is all I need. I'm not worried about the data. Now I'll go back to this data set BDS01. I have not saved it. Sorry, I'll have to save it. Edit, manage fields, uh, done, and save it. Right. So this is my data set, which takes that custom report as a data source. Right. Now, when I go ahead and rerun this integration, right, obviously I'll have to keep getting the latest updated data. So I'm again running this integration now. I'll confirm this. Okay. But then the problem is now when I run this integration, if you see there is some change in my data set schema or my data source schema. So let's see what happens when I run this integration. Again, on the output, if you see there are still the same number of fields. My field count hasn't changed. So I still have company name, workday ID, sector, parent company and parent workday ID. But when I click on edit, you'll see that there is a warning that is displayed. And the reason this warning is displayed is because as you look at this statement once again, the manage field stage, it uses the output of the previous stage as a baseline from which to monitor changes. When this baseline changes, Workday wants you in the pipeline details panel. So here, if you see when I reran this this data set, that integration with the parts, it still it it basically brought in all the details, including the active status. But when it came to manage field stage, it sees that there is some change in the baseline, and that's why it is giving you a warning. So it is always advisable that you add a manage field stage to a base data set to monitor if there is any change in your data source, right? If you don't do that, then you'll not be able to see any changes. You'll not understand if someone has changed your data source, and it will impact everything after that. So a recommended practice that you make changes or you add a manage field stage to your base data set. Make sense? So when I go here, now if you see, it will show me that there is a new field that has been added. It says there is one new field that is detected, and if I want, I can select this and I can also add this. Make sense? Any questions?
Yeah, it's clear,
All right.
Ravi.
So whenever the baseline changes, the manage fields stage, it displays all new and remove fields. Now the same would be the case if I remove some fields as well. It will again give me the same warning that there was some fields which have been removed. Doesn't, again we saw that it would only show that this is a warning and the field would be hidden. It doesn't yet include all changes in the data set schema. It has not included any changes in the data schema, right? And then if I go back, right, it doesn't show any of those changes in the example data row as well, right? So the recommendation is a manage field stage should be added to the base data set to ensure that no future integration can unintentionally remove an existing field or add an existing field, right? Now at the end, if you want to hide some certain fields, at the end you can also add a manage field stage. It is also recommended that a manage field stage is added as the last stage of your data set which is being published, so that if there is any issue, you'll find it before that data set being published. So now this is your final data set, you're going to publish it. So the last stage should be a manage field stage. The advantage is before publishing, you can see finally, is there any issues? Is there any errors? All right. So it should also be added as the last stage of the data set to be published, right? And the advantage, as I mentioned, this enables you to monitor any changes that basically break your published data set. All right. Okay, I would not make any changes. I would go back to my custom report and change the custom report. I just added you to show how it works.
Okay.
Right? Obviously, we don't need this. I'm just changing. I am coming back to my data set and I'll rerun this integration. Run integration now. Okay, now the next thing, till now we have created a number of data sets. So if I click on edit now, let's see what is happening now. Now there's no error, right? Because the schema changes have been reversed. My manage fields is no longer giving me that error. All right. Okay. The next thing that I'll do is create a base data set using external file. All right. So till now, the data sets that we have created, we have only created them using custom reports. But now I want to create a new base data set using an external file, right? Now you can also create a base data set using an SFTP server, but then obviously we don't have the SFTP server connectivity. So I'll not able to show that, but still I'll show you the path. There are some minor variations. I'll show those to you. For that, we would still use a file, but then any data set which changes regularly, very frequently, very often, and you would need regular data loads to happen. For those, we usually create an SFTP. Both are fairly similar. The only difference is one is from your own local machine and the other one is from an external server, right? Now, until see with custom report, you can rerun the custom report and then the data gets uploaded, right? The same logic applies that the data in the data set or the source data in the data set that you have created using file will not change until you upload a new file, right? Which is obvious. So whenever you want some updates, you'll go ahead and upload a new file to that data set. There are a few limitations, of course. The first one is uh, the maximum file size that can be uploaded is 500 MB.
Can we upload zip files with the file size of 500
Mm,
500?
no, I don't think so. I don't think we can do
Okay,
that.
okay.
But then you can upload multiple files of more than 500, right? We'll
Oh,
see.
okay. So
Obviously,
the
with
individual
appending.
size should be 500, is it?
Yes, yes, yes.
Ah, okay, okay.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Let's see. So where is our? Uh, this is our lineage. We'll keep it as is. And let's go to our data catalog and create a new data set. So now I'm creating a new data set, but this time I'm creating it from a file. Now there are some restriction or some parameters for file as well. So what are the file formats that are supported? Okay, so a delimited file has to be used. It could be comma delimited. Uh, it could be, for example, tab delimited, right? Usually these are the two delimiters that we use: CSV, which is comma separated file, a comma delimited file, or a tab delimited file, right? It should be a plain text file, right? The most common format, as I mentioned, is a CSV file. Okay, there should be one row or one record for each line, right? Which means it would consider the line breaks as well, or the new line characters. The second, all records are delimited. which as I mentioned could be comma delimited, tab delimited, and so on and so forth. And the third one
Can it be
has
fixed delimited? Because I know we would get sometimes, not necessary, we
uh,
might get it in that way,
l-
but
there
fixed
are a number
delimited?
of options. There are a number of options. Let's check that. I have not seen.
Okay,
If it's a
okay,
comma
sure.
delimiter options, I think there should be an option in there. The third thing is has the same sequence of fields for every record. Obviously, first row has let's say 10 fields and second row has 12 fields. It wouldn't work, right? It should have even if there's no data, it should have those blanks in between, right? With appropriate commas and tabs. So it should have the same set of fields for every record, right? Okay. Now let's go into the system and create from file. Now this file again has employee details. So it has the worker, and this is a comma separated file. Worker, employee ID, employee. And in this, I'm basically passing the details of stock grants that these employees have received, right? So these employees have received some stocks. I'm passing the data for those stocks, right? So everything is comma delimited. There is one row or one record in each row and separated by a line break. So I'm going to close this and let's go in here, workday classes, and this is the file I am taking. Again, the first thing that Workday does is it parses the data. Now, we also saw that Workday parses the data or it automatically adds a parse stage. If I go to my data catalog and look at a base data set. Where is our base data set? Let's take this one, right? Because it also has worker data. When I see this, you see that any which ways Workday, even through a custom report, Workday has automatically added a parse stage. But here parse stage is not really relevant because it is getting data directly from a custom report. And in that custom report, the data is already in the form of columns and there is separate rows and so on and so forth. But here, because I'm getting data from outside, I'll have to specify those parsing details. The first one is a role delimiter, right? So what it means is how data is identified or how you identify each of these new rows. So here the delimiter that we have used is a line break or any new line. So there are other options as well. So if you select any new line, Workday basically considers any new line that has been added as a new record, right? So usually any new line is used as a row delimiter, right? Now this is my field delimiter. Again, if you come back, so these are my individual rows and these are my individual fields. So the field delimiter here is a comma, and this was your question, right? So we have comma, we have tab, we have space, we have double quote, forward slash, backslash. So these are the options with respect to field delimiter. What was your question, Sai? What did you want to be a delimiter?
I was checking for a fixed like fixed width.
Okay, that option is not available here. Okay,
Okay.
so it is
But
only some.
okay, so I have another question. Sorry. So when I saw the double quote, I remember that. See, in each field, you will also have a double quote, right? So
Yes,
let's say each field comes up
escape
with
character
a
and
double
quote
quote.
character. Yes,
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
option is there. you would also have to specify the escape character as well as the quote character, right? So
Okay.
what is a quote character? Whenever you have a space, obviously you'll be having some quote character, right? uh, it allows you to enclose individual data values. So for example, let's say I have Mark comma Johnson, that is the full name of the employee, right? Now this comma is part of the employee name, right? So in order to handle this kind of requirement, I'll include a quote character. Make sense?
Yeah, because see, certain fields like job title or name, they might also have comma, right? So
The comma, right? That's what I'm saying, right? So let's say an employee name is Mark comma Johnson, right? Many employees have these Mark O'Brien and these kind of names, right? So quote
absolutely,
character basically allows you, so this is your quote character, and then you also specify escape character. So what if this quote character is part of your data? Then you need to escape that as well. Make sense? Right? So what I mean by that is, so you understood what is a quote character, right? So my row delimiter here is a comma, right? And then let's say there is some employee whose name is Mark John. This is the employee name. Now this is one name, not two different records. This is still one field. So I'll enclose this as Mark John. So this way Workday knows that this is not two separate fields. It will not consider this comma to add a new field, right? It will still consider this as one field. But then many a times what happens is a quote character could also be part of data. So for example, could be some data which says uh, has, just a random example, has, let's say, null values. So let's say there is some comment which has this as the data, right? Now for this, I'll have to enclose this in an escape character. So if you see, there is also an escape character. So if Workday has to understand this, then this is how I'll have to design this. I'll say has, so this is my quote character, escape it first, followed by this null, and then again escape it values. So anything which is escaped with an escape character, system knows, okay, this is not a quote character, this is part of your data. So the output of this is has null values, and these two hash codes, they are part of your data itself. Make sense? Understood? Questions? No questions?
yeah, it's clear because it's a file based, right? So I'm pretty
Okay.
much clear on that.
All right, fine. Okay, anything you want me to skip, move forward, just let me know that you already know that part. Okay. When you select this option, use values from the first row. If you see the name of the column are basically
That's
the
a header,
same,
right? Is it like
right?
a
That is my
header?
header row. Yes.
Okay.
So that is my header, right? So I'm basically saying use values from the first row, right? And if I want to ignore a certain number of lines, maybe at the beginning I have added some comments, let's say here, this is this, some comments. So if I want to ignore a few first few lines, then I can say how many lines have to be ignored. Sorry, do I have, yeah, here, rows to ignore. I can say, okay, ignore first four rows or first five rows or whatever, right? Okay, here this option again, if your field value again has some new line, if you check this, then system would know that some data may have a new line character. So then it would know, okay, every new line character doesn't mean it's a new row of data or a new record of data. But then when you check this, system takes a lot of time to load, especially for your large data files. All right. So let me go ahead and save this. Okay, I am going to give this a name, and the name is uh, where is my, so we have already created three base data sets, right? I'm calling it uh, base data set number 04. Oh, this base data set I have created from a file, and this base data set has worker stocks, and again I'm adding it to the tag that I have created, and save this. All right, let's go to the edit mode and see what has happened. So now if you see, I have all worker data. All right, so let's understand this file. For each worker, this is the name of the worker, this is the employee
Yeah.
ID of the worker. What I am doing with this file is I'm basically saying that, for example, Logan McNeil, she has received 100 units of PSUs, which is a type of stock. She has already been granted 100 units. 300 units of stocks are currently outstanding. She is yet to receive them. Out of those 300, 100 she'll receive on 1st of Jan 2021. Other 100 she'll receive on 1st of Jan 2022. And then the third 100 she'll receive on 1st of Jan 2023. So this is basically how many stocks would a given employee be getting and what amount of those stocks are currently pending. Make sense? So this is all I'm trying to achieve with this data set. All right. Okay. Now we have spoken about the manage field stage with respect to a custom report, right? There we saw how a custom report, if there are any changes in the data set schema, based how the data set automatically identifies that there is a new row added or there is a new column added. But when data is coming from an external file as such, it may become tricky. So let's see how your manage field stage handles any data changes. Okay, when you upload, excuse me. So when I upload, let's say a new version of this file. So when you upload a new version of the source file into a data set, right? Workday handles schema changes based on the source file header row. So basically what Workday does is it checks the header row of the source file. Now this is true whether you're talking about an external source file the way we have done here, or whether you're talking about a custom report as well, because there as well each custom report has a column name. So this is how Workday behaves. So if there is a header row, so if there is, or if the source file contains a header row. Then Workday uses the field names in the header row of the data set to determine which fields are in the source. So all Workday does is the data set, it simply checks the current fields in the data set and compares it with the new fields in the source file. And all it does this comparison by comparing those header rows or the names of that header rows, right? So in this case, new fields can be added or deleted from anywhere in the source file. So if you remember, we added active status right in the middle of our source file, and still Workday was able to detect it, right? So Workday was able to detect it based on the name of that column, saying, oh, this is a new column called active. All right. However, when the source file does not have a header, then Workday only handles the changes that occur at the end of the source file. So if the source file doesn't have a header, then Workday only handles the changes that are at the end of the source file. Make sense? Because now it has no way to determine that whether a new
Yeah.
row has been added in the middle or not,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so now my base data set is ready. What I'll have to do is, if you see, I have this as my final, this is my BDS03. I'm going to, uh, we don't need this. This is my DDS03. We also have yeah. So this is my DDS03. Now this is what I'm planning to do. Here, if you see, the common field is employee name and employee ID. So now I'll map employee name with employee ID. But before I do that, if you see, the problem is here employee ID is a text field, whereas here employee ID is a field of type integer, right? So I'll add a manage field stage, right? I'm selecting all of these fields, but what I'm also doing is I'm changing the field type of employee ID to text, right? And I'll say done, and then I'll go ahead and save my changes, right? I'll stop here. Before I do a join, there is one more stage that I want to talk about, and that is a unpivot stage. So we'll do an unpivot stage tomorrow, and after doing the unpivot stage, that's when we'll go ahead and do our join, right? So tomorrow we'll do an unpivot stage. Okay.